We are on the section going into financial mathematics, um, 5 and 6. So today we'll do 5, and then on Monday, instead of going directly into the sort of the tutored part, we're going to go right into 6 because you'll see they're very similar. It'll be a short presentation on Monday just to kind of, because we're going to use the same tools. It's just when you're saving money, you're on one side of the table, you're giving it, say, to a bank or to someone to invest it for you, and they pay you interest. When you're getting a loan, it's just the other way around. You're getting money from somebody else, and then you pay them back interest. So the mathematics is the same. It's just which side of the table you're sitting on um, as we go. So we'll get into that. And yeah, so we'll just go ahead. So under financial math, I do have a little presentation I'll go through. I have already opened up, I've got 2 online calculators here for you, simple interest calculator and a financial calculator. The financial calculator one also is, you can find it in both, what do they call those, app stores for either Apple or Android. So you can download them to your phone. I highly encourage you to do so because then that gives you a little calculator you can use on the side. Plus, you have it with you whenever you're going, and you take that with you after this class. I've got it online, on mine, and anytime you need to try to calculate how much money do I need to save to retire or whatever you want to do, you can just pull it out and you can do it. Is this a good loan? Well, this is what it's going to cost me over. You can do all the calculations. And what we're going to focus on is not using formulas, although in today's presentation, I will introduce you to the formulas, but we're not going to do the formulas. It's a lot of algebra and stuff. It's not that it can't be done. It's just that financial planners, typically, they will use these apps, these financial planning apps, the TVM solvers, time value of money. So, and if you've got a TI-84 calculator, they're on those. They're on a lot of devices. They all work very similarly. So we'll go through and work through a few of those. And then after that, we'll have, so Monday is another sort of instructional day followed by a work day if you want. And then Wednesday will be a work day. And then we'll have a review day for the midterm. And then we have our midterm coming up relatively soon. And remember, the midterm will be just everything we've done from chapter 1 to 6. And it's 30 questions, all multiple choice. So you've got all the answers, but you just have to choose the right answer out of the group. And then we move on to the second 6 chapters, and we're not going to test again on this, so it's just going to look at that. So let's get into our presentation. And again, a lot of this, especially at the beginning, is just to give you an overview of what financial math is about, maybe what you need to do. This is that stuff that's, we're not going to test you on most of this stuff. So just an overview. So let's go ahead and get into this. This part, we're going to talk a little bit how to take control of your finances. So that's more a personal issue. We're going to talk about the power that compounding interest does as far as building wealth. And a lot of the homework problems are designed that way. So once you get into the homework, it's as you do them, don't just get the answer and say, oh, I got it right. But look at that answer. What does that mean? Compare the 2 answers. How is compounding better than non-compounding? We're going to talk about today savings plans and different types of investments, how they work and get you there. And then Monday, that's when we'll talk about loan payments, credit cards, and mortgages and those sorts of things. So the 2 sides of your financial future. Some savings, so you get money working for you. Borrowing is using other people's monies to accomplish things. You might not have enough money to buy a car, but you need a car to get to work, so you take a loan. You don't want to live in the desert under a tent for 20 years until you have enough money to pay cash for a house. You'd like to live in that house, so you get a loan and you buy the house now rather than later. So that's what we use the loans for, the good use of loans. So a few things to think about: taking control of your finances that maybe you've thought of before, maybe you haven't. I go back and forth. I do it for a while, and then I get lazy, and then I say, oh, I better start watching these again, right? So know what you have available to you. to spend, because you don't want to come up and all of a sudden you're going to buy lunch and you have no money in your account, right? Uh, don't bounce a check. Now, how many of you use paper checks? Rarely, occasionally. In fact, they're hard to get now these days, but a lot of things it's done online. But at the same time, no, if you're going to pay somebody, make sure you have that credit limit available or in the account. Know what you're spending, and especially there's apps out there now, because a lot of things sign up for subscriptions, and they can keep running even when you're not using them anymore, and you forget about them. That's what they're kind of hoping. It's a little bit of money, but it can all add up, right? So know what you're spending. Um, Keep track of both your debit and credit cards, however it is, because they're pieces of paper. And in the past, it was, if you're using paper money, when the money was gone, you had no money. Now with cards, it's hard to tell how much is really left, right? Uh, Try not to buy on impulse. I just, maybe I had a bad day and I go buy something, I feel better. That does happen, but just it's usually you end up spending money on stuff that you're not going to be using. So make purchases that make sense. Uh, my mom had this habit of watching late night TV when she couldn't sleep, but then the next day she'd find that there was like jewelry being delivered to her door because she bought the 2 a.m. stuff. She goes, I don't even remember. I remember I thought it was a dream and stuff, but she would actually, half asleep, order jewelry. So be careful. uh, and then finally, we're going to talk about making a budget and then don't overspend it. So kind of planning out how you're going to use your money so that you're in control of the finances. They're not in control of you. Uh, for making a budget, list out all the money that you have coming in. And sometimes you might, as a student, you might have some financial aid that hits at the beginning of the semester, but it's got to last you maybe over 3 or 4 months. So budget those out, those kind of things. Also list all what your expenses are. Again, there's sometimes expenses like car insurance. Maybe you pay it every 6 months or something, but then sort of when you budget, you want to budget those as monthly expenses so that by the time it comes, you have that money to do it. Subtract your expenses from your total income, and that's what we call cash flow. If it's positive, what does that mean? What's positive cash flow? It's you're good. Yeah, you still got money left. You're good. Your negative cash flow, you're spending more than you got, and that's going to be a problem because you'll run out at some point. Well, that's negative cash flow. So that's what you got to look at. So then the fourth step is make those adjustments. As long as you've got the positive cash flow, you can pay for all your bills and everything. Those unexpected things that come up. No matter how good a planning you do, if you get down to the last penny, the car battery goes out, or this goes out, something happens. So have those rainy day funds available too. What we're going to look at in this course, we're going to look at how savings works. That's what we're doing now. Monday, we're going to look at the basics of loans. So we understand those two sides and how, and a lot of times that's, the emergency happens. We need some money now. That's where we use a credit card or loans in some form. But we got to know how they work. Two things we're not going to do in this class, but that are helpful, is to understand how taxes are computed and how they affect, because the more you work, everything is taxed, right? You go to the store and even a piece of candy, they put tax on it. So understanding how the taxes are working, and how you can set yourself up to be tax advantage. One of the things is sometimes having some kind of a business, even if it's not your primary, uh, but a business will allow you to write off things from your taxes. Uh, and you can go a long time. I was selling real estate. I wasn't really selling. I did a little bit. I made a little bit off of it, but it was more of a hobby background. But what it did is it gave me an outlet to write off some things, and the tax savings I got from it were great. Uh, and you can do that with a business. So those types of things, and then also understanding how the federal budget may affect us. And again, as a student, what did they budget in for financial aid? When it's there, then there's some more financial aid, and maybe makes things easier. So the budget does affect what's available to us, small business loans, those kind of things. but those are types of things to take a look into yourself as needed. Okay. I've got this in the, if you look in the modules, there's a link. It's a PDF file. This is the book my boss gave me within the first week I was working for him. I'd worked for some other agents who did mutual funds and life insurance and health insurance. Went to another boss, and he really took me under his wing. This is it's called The Richest Man in Babylon. It's about a guy who basically comes out of the desert in ancient Babylon, and he comes up with this formula for everybody becoming rich slowly over 20 to 30 years. And basically the formula is whatever you make, spend 70% of it. Wow, that's a lot. Live off of that 70%. He says, but that's the hard part. 20% pay off your debts, 10% you save. And if you do that, that 10% that you're saving over 30 years will replace your income. And he says that's what wealth is you're no longer having to work for that money, but you're getting that same amount of money. And depending upon how wise you are with your investing, you could do it maybe 20 to 30 years. And again, if you're wise with it, you get that 20% that you're paying off debts. If you get that done, you put that over. But he says you always live off of the 70%. One of the things is you don't want to get too cheap. Okay, I'm going to save more money, but then you don't enjoy life, and then you'll get in this thing where you're real conservative, but then you go back and so anyway, that's his thing, and it's got some side stories in there. It's kind of interesting read about different things that they do, and like they invest in some emeralds, but they're not really emeralds. It just ends up being green glass. So it's kind of like if you're going to invest, make sure you're doing it with somebody you can trust, with somebody you know something about because they didn't know. Anyway, interesting stories. We are going to use this. So there's two types of interest. Simple interest is you put your money in there and they give you all the interest at the end. You don't get interest on your interest. It's just all paid at the end. That's called simple interest. You'll notice this in a lot of the homework. It will say simple interest. For that, there is a special calculator. This one here, this is the one we will use. We'll do a few examples with it. And I'll demonstrate that a little bit later. But again, there's also a formula, which you're welcome to use. But what I like to do is focus on the tools that we can get using. Compound interest, so the power of compounding. Compounding is when they pay you your interest as the investment goes. And so for that, we need a special TVM advanced calculator. It has compounding in it. And you'll notice down here, compounding. So they tell you how often it gets compounded, all that stuff. What we're going to be doing is, notice there's all these boxes. There's something called a present value. That's typically what you put into the investment at the beginning, or for a loan, it's what you start with. It's the value here. Sometimes there's payments involved, sometimes not. So this could be zero or it could be a number. And then there's a future value for that money, for that investment. If it's savings, it may be an amount. There's an interest rate that is being paid, and there are a number of periods. So if I do something monthly for 2 years, how many periods would be involved? 12 times 2, 24. So that's it calculates all that in. In all the questions we're going to do, you're going to be able to use this. The question will give you enough information to fill in all of these boxes except for one. The one that's not filled in is what the question is. So the question might be, what is the future value? All the boxes get filled in except for the future value. You'll click on this box and you'll get your answer. Sometimes they'll say, how much do we need to invest to get this future value? So then you're looking for a present value. And again, that will be the blank, nothing in here. You'll click on the PV and it will calculate that for you. So it's taking care of all the algebra rather than you putting into formulas and messing everything around. You just put everything into these slots. And the missing part is the question. You click on the box. When we get to loans, a lot of times the question is, how much is the monthly payment? So we got all the details about the loan except the monthly payment. We put it all in there, click on payment, and we've got it. Okay. There's a little bit of trick to knowing what goes where, and that's what the homework's about. You'll learn that as you do them, and we'll work together through that. Okay. Now I'm going to show you some of the formulas that are behind this, not because I want you to use them, but I want you to understand a little bit about the mathematics of where the power of savings is at. So this is the compound interest formula. And notice they have all the details. They've got the future value, the present value. If we go back to this box, we're just going to put present value in this box. We'll put future value in that box. But we want to see the mathematics. So we take the present value and then it gets multiplied by 1 plus the interest rate. And the 1 is 100%. You get your investment back plus this interest rate. Remember when we were doing percentages, if your growth, it's 100 plus the interest rate. So that's what's going on here. And then there's an exponent up here, which represents time, number of years of the investment. Okay, could be a fraction such. N is how often that interest is paid for compounding. Again, we don't use it, but we just want to see where it's at. Now, I've got a question for you. Which one of these is going to be bigger? If I take 3 times 4, what do I get? If I take 3 raised to the 4th power, what do I get? 3 times 3 is 9, times 9 is 27, times 9 more is 81, right? 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, 81. Which one is bigger? Exponents. Exponents have, when we have the number. Oh, I thought, yeah. When we have whatever's up in that exponent has more power. So notice what is in the exponent is time. So remember, the longer time you have for an investment, that's where you're really getting the big power. Okay. Down here, we're multiplying, so getting a better interest rate is helpful because when you multiply by a bigger number, 3 times 5 is 15. It's a bigger number, but 3 to the 4th is, this exponent is the most powerful part of this equation. So that's just getting you to understand that in investing, the longer time frame you have, the more power you have. Also, just remember, keep it in the back of your mind, whatever we talk about today as being the best thing to do, when we get to Monday, that might be the worst thing to do because it's, again, you're on the other side of the table. So what's good for you on this side as a saver, as an investor, what's good for you here is not so good for you as the borrower. Okay, but so longer time periods. You okay with that? And again, you could use this to do all your calculations. It would work, but I think you'll like using the TVM solver. This is just a table that shows if you're getting paid 8% interest over a 1-year period. If you get it paid basically at the end of the year, you got 8%, right? But if they pay it to you, they're only paying you 8%, but if they pay it as it goes 4 times a year, so that's quarterly, every 3 months they pay it, it's the same as if you're getting a higher interest rate. Now you're still getting 8%, but when you calculate it, and you'll do some of these calculations in the homework, the yield of that is like getting a higher interest rate. And the more times they pay it, so here's 12 times a year, which would be monthly, it goes up. Daily, it goes up. But notice there's sort of a limit. No matter how many times you do it, 1 billion times, it doesn't get much bigger than 8.3%. And that was monthly. So once you're monthly, if you're getting compounded monthly, that's as good as it pretty much is as it gets. Again, it gets a little bit better, but not much. There's kind of that limit. But going from once a year to monthly is a big step, right? That's a good chunk of interest, and especially over time. Okay, so it just shows you that compounding has this period, has this power, but the more often you compound, it has a limiting value. It doesn't get too much bigger. So we're going to look at savings plans and investments. So as we go for savings, what happens is, let's say you start off with nothing, but you're making a monthly payment. Then what's happening is, again, still, we don't have to understand all of this. It's got interest rates. It's kind of looking kind of complicated. But what I want you to focus on too is still time is up in the exponent. So as investment, the longer time frame you give yourself, the better returns you'll see. And we're going to take a look. I've got 2 of my favorite students from years ago who got back in touch with me, and they gave me some details about what they've been doing. I'm going to share that with you, and you'll see starting early really makes a difference. Okay. Then if you've got your savings and you've got some, so this is what the calculator handles. Again, this is what you'd have to do if you had $10,000 in an account, you started paying $500 a month and tried to do all these calculations. This is what that formula looks like. Pretty complicated, right? But in our TVM solver, it's nice. You get a focus on the details rather than the mathematics of all of this stuff going on. But again, what I want to pull out is what's up in the exponent? Years. So each year that builds that exponent. And again, we did 3 to the 4th, right? That's 81. But what if we left it in for one more year, 3 to the 5th? I don't know what that is. That's a big number, 243 or so. What's 81 times 3? I can't do that in my head. Well, I could do it in my head, but I'm lazy. So see somebody else pulling a calculator out. 243. I was right. See, sometimes you just have to trust yourself, but I don't know. So just one more year. Look, boom, you got that much more. So sometimes that happens with that exponent, that exponential growth. Okay. And again, what we focus on is we're going to have all these details, except one will be missing. And again, we just click on the button and it will give it to us. We don't have to plug in here and all this algebra stuff going on. It's all going to happen for us that way. Okay, this is one calculation that we will also be asked to do. Is called a total return. Now, you're going to see that you'll see this listed. Basically, you just take the future value minus the present value divided by the present value. If you think back to Chapter 3, we were talking about percent change. This is exactly the same thing. Remember, but we did it was the new value minus the old value divided by the old value. And present value is the older value. So it's really it's exactly what we were doing. Remember, you'll get a decimal. So if you want to turn it to a percentage, you just multiply it by 100. So we'll multiply this by 100. So that gives us a total return. But it doesn't take into account the amount of time. It's just you invested this much, you sold it for this much, that's your total return. Okay. We're also going to look at annual return, which is actually a better value to have because better comparison. Okay. So here's an example. Let's say in 2004, we bought some property and we paid $27,500. Then a few years later, in 2013, we sold it for $43,400. We made a profit, right? So now what is our total return? Again, this is the new or the future value. This is the old. And I'll just click here. So we've got the new minus the old divided by the old times 100. They don't show that in here, but you put the times 100, you'll get up that was a total return of 57.8%. Okay, and there'll be one in the quiz and in the homework like this, so we'll do that. Okay, so total return. That's the one type of formula you kind of going to want to have. Annual return takes into account time because, right, we went from 2004 to 2013. That's 9 years. So 57%, 57.8% sounds like a pretty good return, which it is. But is it a good return if it took 8 years or 9 years or, the longer it takes to get that is not as good. So what we want to also be able to do is find an annual return. And it's a little easier calculation. You just take the future value divided by the present value, and then you raise it to the power of 1 over the number of years. Okay, and then you subtract the 1. So this will give you the annual return here. So again, another one that you may want to put down. We'll use it later on. There's one like this in the quiz. We'll also show you can use the TVM solver to do it as well. So whichever way works best for you. So far, so good? Okay, so those are the two formulas that we may be using. Other than that, we'll be using TVM solver. So here they want the basically same question, 2004, 2013, we sold it, same amounts, but we want to know what's the annual return. And so we use that formula, 43,400 divided by 27,500, And then we raise it to, since it's 9 years, 1 divided by 9 is in the exponent, subtract 1, and you find that it's only an annual return of 5.2%. You know, so you be careful, because a lot of times they'll say our total return on an investment is 57.8, which they could say that's our total return. And that word total makes it sound like that's the real return. It just means it's over all the time. But annually, it was like getting 5.2%. Not as exciting. Still not bad for real estate. Real estate, if you get about 4%, you're doing pretty well. So it's a conservative investment. It's not bad, but it's certainly not 57.8%. Not as exciting. So annual return is typically, when you want to compare two investments, you want to look at the annual return. How far? So far, so good? Okay. Now we're going to look at different types of investments. Again, not something that's on the test, but this is something in your life. So there's three main ways of investing. You can invest in stocks, which is to own a part of a company, along with maybe opening your own business completely. But as an investor, when you buy a share of stock, you are actually an owner in the company, right? You'll get voting rights, even with just one share. It might not, again, it might not be a lot, but the more you have, the more you have. Now, sometimes stocks will pay dividends if the company's doing well. So there's those kind of income. Some don't pay dividends, which is, like every quarter they give you some of the profit. Sometimes they don't. So there's ways to make money with stocks, but you're owner of the company. If the company goes bankrupt, your investment could be completely lost, right? Because they go out of business. And that's just one of the things to be careful about. I had some friends when I was back in Oregon, and his wife worked for Benjamin Franklin Savings and Loan. She had worked for them for 20 years. Her retirement was all in Benjamin Franklin Savings and Loan stocks. That was her employer. Benjamin Franklin Savings and Loan went bankrupt. Their stock became worthless, so there was her retirement. They went bankrupt, so there was her job. She lost everything. So it's one of these things is we want to diversify. My dad worked for Consolidated Freightways. He had a lot of stock options. When he retired, he was able to sell them, and the company was doing well. But again, be careful about, while it's good to own a portion of the company you work for, it also puts everything in one basket. If your employer goes down, you lose your job, you could use all your savings at the same time. So that's the thing with stocks. One way to protect yourself a little bit is to go with something called a bond. And a bond is actually like you're giving a loan. So when you buy a bond, they're making a promise to repay it. There's an interest rate associated with it. And if they go bankrupt, they still may have to pay these back. So the bondholders are the ones who get paid first. So if there's any assets that get sold, if you're a bondholder, you'll get some of that money first. Stockholders only get what's left after that. So it's a little bit more safe. It's a little bit less risk. Also, if the company does really well, it doesn't matter because you've already made your agreements with the bond. You don't get extra. You just get what you already agreed to. So it's not really investing in the company. It's investing in a contract and a promise to pay. So bonds, stocks, and bonds, and having sort of a mix of those is a good deal. One of the things I was involved with, I was not a stockbroker, although my grandfather was. What I got involved with is called mutual funds. And with mutual funds, you hire money managers, basically, who are running funds, and you say, okay, here, I'm going to give you some money. You guys figure out what stocks to buy, what bonds to buy, and they'll tell you what their strategy is. And if you invest in mutual funds, you're usually investing in hundreds of companies, both bonds and stocks, and they move it around, and all you're doing is you're watching how your manager is doing. So you're really hiring the manager, and there's a lot of information about that. And that's kind of how I decide which funds to put like my retirement money in as I go look at who's the managers of these funds, because they do move around, and you want, oh, this guy did, he's got a good track record. Even when the stock market goes down, He does good. So mutual funds is another way. And again, they're not a different type of investment. They just take these two types of investments and there's somebody running the ship for you. They do charge a fee, but I tell you what, they also take a lot of the risk off of you. The last type of investments, what we call cash, and these are short, very short-term investments, like in U.S. Treasury bills, where you get some interest, you earn some interest on the money, but you can get your money back very quickly as well. They're very low risk, but also usually not very high returns. But again, you go into a mutual fund, they will always have some of the money in cash so that they can move it quickly and buy stocks when there's a good buy and those kind of things. So those are the three types of investments. Yes. Uh, an IRA is an individual retirement account. It's not a type of investment. It is a wrap around an investment so that you don't pay any taxes on the interest. Usually on investments, each year you have to show how much interest you earned on it, and then you have to pay taxes as you go. With an IRA, individual retirement account, they sort of put a wrap around it, and the government ignores it. They don't charge you any interest until you take it out. There is a Roth IRA where you've already paid the taxes on the money and then it grows without taxes. And when you take it out, there's no taxes. So a lot of people like those because, yeah, if you have it over 30-year time period and you haven't paid any taxes, when you go to take your money, take out 100,000, 20,000 goes to the government in taxes. So there's various ways to set them up. And my goal today is not to tell you what to do, but just to give you these ideas. Find a good money manager, someone you can trust, someone you know. Build that relationship with them. A couple of students I've had in the past, or I see them, I kept in touch, and they're doing these kind of things. So find someone and educate yourself on the things that are interesting to you. Keep a little bit of track. Don't trust anybody 100%. Always have a way to check on them. But there's some good people out there. Let them do their job. Your job is to follow up on it, but just to know that there's these different types of things, and so that when they can explain it to you, you know what they're doing. Just like know enough about a car, you don't have to know enough about a car to fix it, but know enough that when you take it to that place and they tell you what's wrong with it, that you can tell whether they're scamming you or not, right? So that's the same thing with investments. So considerations, liquidity, how quickly can I get my money out? So real estate's a great investment, but typically it can take months to get the money back because you got to sell it. Sometimes it can take years. You buy your house and you live in it. If the market's down, you might not be able to sell it and get your money out for years until it comes back. So liquidity is a big thing. Cash investments, they might not be as much return, but you might be able to get your money out fast. Risk, there's risk with all investments. Put money in, you may not get it back. Again, there's protections of putting it in a bank account, certain interest rates and stuff, but there's always some sort of risk. Typically, the more risk you're willing to take, the more return you're also going to be able to get. But that's a balance. And finally, the return. So the risk return liquidity thing. The more you lock something in for a longer period of time, the more risk you take, typically the higher return you can get. But again, with risk, you can also get negative returns. And you might not be able to get your money out when you need it. So you've got to take all of these things in and say, what can I do? And that's where that formula, live off your 70%, have enough, 20% to pay your debts, and then 10% will seem like a small amount that you can just sort of stick away. And if you lose it, you lose it. But again, you don't want to lose it all. Let's see what else. Okay. The other thing here's it's an older one now. Only goes back to 2010, but it shows the stock market. There was a little problem here. I think that was called World War One, 1914. Closed down for a bit. This right here was sort of the crash. Stock market crash, 1929. Boom, it went down. But notice there's been some bigger crashes along the route. So like here, we were doing real well, but on the next year, it was way down. So it goes up and down. So this is the idea that money or time it can be your friend. Because if you I've looked at a chart like this that does a 20-year running average. So you buy it here and you sell it 20 years later. If you do that, it levels things out because you're not caught in times like this for the most part. Um, so giving yourself that time horizon for your investments uh, helps to reduce the risk and increase the rate of return. And you can get 10 to 12% on a regular basis in the stock market. Oh, forgot to make the big buildup, but here's my two favorite students, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. It's a story about two brothers um, that the class here at Scottsdale Community College. One of them listened to this lecture and said, okay, I'm going to invest when I get my job. I'm going to start investing right away. The other brother said, I'll wait because I've been in college. I want to enjoy my time. So here's their story. They both get the same job, similar job, paying $40,000 a year. Tweedledee decides I will put my 10% away. So yeah, 40,000 or 4,000, 10%, and he has it taken out of his paycheck. By the end of the year, and all these calculations, I think I'm doing it about 8%. He now has 4,320 because he's gotten some interest growth. He does this for the first 10 years, and so at the end of 10 years, he now has 66,000 in his fund. Tweedledum, on the other hand, has had this idea, I'll start that next year. I'll start it next year. And it keeps on being next year. And after 10 years, he hasn't done anything. He got a big nothing. So Tweedledum comes to Tweedledee and says, well, you got 66, but you did it for 10 years. I look at our salaries are going up, right? Because cost of living and stuff. So they get raises. They say, I'm making more money now. I'll bet you if you stop for 10 years and I go on for 10 years, I can catch up. What do you think? Think that Tweedledum is going to catch up to Tweedledee in 10 years? No. Okay. You're right. Tweedledee stops, but he leaves that money in there. So it's now he's not putting any money in. But look at, he's got 143 at the end of this is 20 years for him, 10 years of putting in and 10 years of not. Tweedledum put in for 10 years, but he put in for the second 10 years and not the first. He's only got 77. So that time value of money, right? This interest that we're getting over time, he's got double the money. And he put in less money because he put it when they were making less, right? Well, Tweedledum says, give me 10 more years. Do you think he'll catch him then? You saw this story, huh? He still hasn't caught him. Tweedledee, after 30 years, 309,000. This was just on putting the first 10 years away and stopping. Still, Tweedledum has put in for 20 years, can't catch him. And the final story, they get to retirement age, which, or at least for me, I'm at, government says 67 years is now full retirement age. Finally did catch him. But look at it, took 33 years of putting in to pretty much match what Tweedledee did just putting in for 10 years, the first 10 years, that time value of money. Okay. And just to be honest, I was more like Tweedledum than Tweedledee. And you put it in and then you got some money and you want to spend it, you go spend it, but then it's not there growing anymore, right? So these things happen. The story is not to cry over spilled milk. You can't go backwards, but to think of it. You keep thinking, I'll do it next year. I'll do it next year. Sometimes next year becomes 10 or 20 years. Now, here's the question is, do you think Tweedledee would have really stopped putting that money away? I don't think so. Because they take it out of your paycheck. You never see it. And so, you don't miss it. So this is what really would have happened. Well, this is the summary. Okay, so here's the summary. In that case, Tweedledee only put in 42,000 because the first year, Tweedledum put almost 200,000 into this account to get what he got, to get about the same thing. So that's that time value. But had he not, which, he would have had twice as much, $1.6 million versus $851 million. And again, put in a little bit more, yes, those early 10 years, but that extra 42,000 got him an extra 841,000. So starting early. When you get a job, if they have a a retirement plan, sign up for it, especially if they have a match. A lot of them do. That's free money, right? You can't, you got to do at least the match. With ASU, they do a 7%. In fact, they force us to do it. Maricopa, there's a different type of plan, but there's a match. So it's like you've got to do at least the match. Whatever they'll match, put it away. It's free money. And then, and again, you don't see it out of your paycheck. You learn, you're not living, you don't even miss it. But then over the time period, this is what you can get. Okay. So, yes, sir. It was about 8%. If I did this in a different Excel and I've lost that, so I just got these saved. So, but I believe it was about 8% because if you're doing mutual funds, you should be able to get about 8%. And that's a good question though, as you do planning for yourself. Uh, it's great if you plan at 16%. I put a little bit of money and I get a lot, right? But what's the reality? Are you really going to be able to get 16% every year or 20%? Probably not. So if you plan at a lower rate, then you'll know it's going to be there. If you get that higher rate, then it's extra money. And I have never found a person who complained about having too much money to retire on. Oh, I got all this money, I just don't know what to do with it. No, they always know what to do with it. I've had a number of friends who didn't have enough money and complained that, we're living off of Social Security. It's not enough money. I got to work. And they complained about that. But I've never found anybody who complained about saving too much money and for retirement. No, if you find that person, we got to write their life story or something. I don't know what's. We'll help them spend their money, right? That's what I would tell Dad. If you've ever got too much money, I can help you with that. Um, but that's pretty much it for today. So it's just kind of seeing that overall. This is what you're going to do as we work on the homework. And so let's go ahead and get into the quiz questions. I think there's 5 of them here. And what we're going to do is focus on how we use these 2 calculators to do the problems. And again, you're just going to go through and do it. As you do the homework, remember you can try it multiple times. So go ahead and plug them in. The worst thing that's going to happen is you got them in the wrong spot and your number's not right. Then just take a look and say, oh, it must have been a present value, or it was sometimes present value and payments it's easy to get mixed up. But we'll go through this. One thing I like to do with these is I take them out of the tab, and then you can kind of resize the window. And so when we want to use it, it's just kind of like over here in the corner. Oops. I don't want that. I want to, yeah. I'll do that one, and then I'll show you the simple interest we use whenever it says that they're getting paid simple interest. Otherwise, we'll use the compounding one. And again, there's advertisings and stuff here, so got to leave it a certain size. Okay, so come back and we're going to take a look at homework quiz chapter 5. There's 5 questions in here. I'm going to reset it. Go ahead and go with the teacher preview. And let me make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay. So this question, Joy invests $19,000 at 4% simple interest. So we're going to use the simple interest calculator, right? For 45 years. How much interest is earned over the 45-year period, and how much is the count at the end of the 45-year period? I'm going to show you, we're going to use the simple interest calculator, 19,000, 4%, 45 years. So first of all, in the simple interest calculator, if you click up here, there's different things you can solve for. We can solve for the total. It's going to give us principal and interest, or we give it the principal and interest rate. You could solve for the principal, that's the amount that you deposit. You could solve for the rate, the interest rate. Some of the questions are that. Or you could solve for the time period. Okay, the first one is solving for the total. The principal is what you put in for your savings, so they're going to save $19,000. The interest rate goes here. It's 4%, and we just put that in as 4. And then the time was 45 years. Yeah, 45 years. You put that in. And again, you can change years to months or whatever they give you, but 45 years. And then we just click on the calculate button. And what I like about this is it also shows us the formulas involved, that the accumulated value is equal to the principal 1 plus RT. So if you want to calculate it by hand, you could. They give us two answers. They give us A, which is it's the total value, the accumulated value. And they also give us this down here, the I, the interest only. So they've already done that calculation. You can kind of see that the accumulated value, if you subtract off the investment of 19,000, that's what the interest is. You're going to have to do this by hand when we do the compound interest, because sometimes they'll ask for how much interest was earned. And all you have to do is take what was invested, subtract from what you earned. But this calculator does it both for us, right? So we got our values here. You could even copy and paste. So here's our interest. Copy. I want the interest there. Paste. And then what is the count value? That's the total amount. That's this one up here. And again, you can just copy and paste if you like. And I think we'll get, and it does it just fine. Okay, so that's a simple interest. This is not an algebra class, so you don't have to use the formulas. You could, but again, use the technology. Any questions on the simple interest calculator? Okay, let's see. I think we have another one here. Good. Rashid wants to invest $6,200 in a savings account. Determine the interest rate, simple interest. So we're going to use the same calculator required for Rashid's investment to double in value in 18 years. Okay, so this time we're going to use the simple interest calculator. I'm going to clear it so everything's out of there. But remember, we want to find the interest rate. So what we have to do up here first is change it to rate. We want to find the rate. When we do that, notice now there are different inputs. To get the rate, we have to have the total and the principal. So she wants to invest 6,200. Is that at the beginning or at the end? 6,200. Is that the beginning? Yeah, so that's what she's going. It's the beginning. That's the principal. That's what we call principal value, 6,200. It's over. Determine the investment rate required for Rashid's investment to double in value in 18 years. So we know 18 years. Let's go ahead and put that in. Time is 18 years. If it doubles in value, how much will she have, or how much does she want to have at the end? 2 times the principal, right? 12,400. So take the 6,200 times 2. Now it's doubled. Again, we've got everything ready. We just have to calculate. And it tells us, and it even gives us the formula. We could have done the formula if we wanted to, but it's a 5.5556. So if we're going to round it to one decimal place, it'd be 5.6. See, what do they want? To the nearest tenth of a percent. So yeah, 5.6. And I have not found a downloadable app that does just simple interest. There might be one out there, and that's perfectly fine. If you find apps that you're more comfortable with, you're welcome to use them. Okay, but these are the ones I found, and in fact, I think I had a different one, and a student showed me this one. I thought, oh, this one's a little nicer because it even talks you through all the stuff here if you want to find out the details. So it's nice. Okay, so simple interest, just use this. It'll give you your answers, but you've got to think your way through the problem. You good with that? Okay, that was question 2. We'll check our answer. It's good. Now we're going to get, I won't do all of these, but I'll just show you this. This has multiple calculations to kind of get you this idea about compounding. The more often we compound, the higher we're actually getting. So $1,600 is invested in an account for 10 years. Find the value of the investment at the end of 10 years if the interest is 6.6% compounded annually. So since we're compounding, we no longer use the simple interest, so I'm going to shrink that down. We need to use this TVM, time value of money. This is the compounding one. So let's see, what are the details? Present value, we invested $1,600. We're doing that for 10 years. And the first one is annual, so the compounding we have to fill in here is annually, which is once a year. For 10 years, that's 10 times 1. So the periods is always number of compounding periods in a year times the number of years. Okay, so we'll see how that works when we get to quarterly and so forth. Okay, because the number of periods will change. Interest rate, 6.6%. So notice that's not changing. There are no payments. Now, they didn't mention payments, so we have to assume that there'll be 0. I'll put that in there. And they want to know what find the value of the investment, so the future value. I click on the box that says future value, and it calculates it. That's my value. Now, notice it's a negative 3,000. What does that mean? It means that money has a directional value as well. So this 1,600 went away from us. The other money's coming in the other direction. It came back to us. So when we're doing these investments, the way to think about it is money as an investor, money that goes away from me, I think of that as a negative event. So I'm going to put the negative up here, and notice when I calculate on the future value now, it's a positive number. So it's just a way of keeping track of the money's going out or coming back. And it doesn't really matter. You're not going to put that negative into the answer anyway, but just to keep track of it, because a little bit later, when we do future value, present value, sometimes you've got that sign, that negative sign is important. So we'll see. I'm going to copy this, and then I'll just paste it in here. Okay. I'll do the next one. Compounded semi-annually. Semi-annually is how many times a year? 2 times a year. So again, here we just choose semi-annual. TI-84 calculator, you actually put in 2 times a year. But now the periods, it's 10 years times 2. There's going to be 20 periods that the interest is paid. 20 times that the interest gets paid. Okay, so we had to change that. We don't change anything else. We're just not going to click on the future value. Watch this, will go up a little bit. So 3,031.74 is going to be 3,062.85. So just by paying that interest twice a year instead of once a year, we got an extra $30. Okay, so you paste that in there. Compounded quarterly. Again, we just choose quarterly here, but how often is quarterly? There's 4 quarters in a dollar, 4 quarters in a year, so it's 4 times a year. So it's still 10 years, but it's going to happen 40 times. 40 times we get paid our interest. Okay, so we're going to pay the interest more often. Nothing else changes. We just click on future value. Watch, this will become larger again. 3,079. Not as big. It's about another $15 or so, but it did go up. Okay, copy. So the more often we compound, the better it is. And remember, the best bang for the buck is going to be right here about monthly. So we change this to monthly. How many months are there in a year? 12. 12 times 10 is 120. So the interest will get paid 120 times over the 10 years. Okay with that? So just remember that period has to change. This is one of the harder parts. It's just one that you may easily forget. So we change it to monthly. So 10 years, 10 times 12 is 120. And we change the future value. It's now 3,090. So notice it's about $60 more than what we started with just getting annual compounding. Oops. Try that again. Copy. And I'll show you the last one, daily. So again, we just come over here. There is an option to do daily. How many days are there in a year? 365. 365 times 10 is going to be that the interest will get paid 3,650 times over the 10 years. And notice 3,090. It'll go up a little, but not that much more. Another $5. Okay. So it's like check our answer. It's all good. Again, just getting you that idea that compounding is valuable. And I don't know, I haven't checked a lot, but sometimes savings and loans or credit unions, they sometimes, I had one that was paying interest quarterly, 4 times a year, rather than monthly. A monthly is much better. Okay. I think we've only got 2 more questions. How much would you need to deposit in an account now in order to have $4,000 in the account in 5 years? Assume the account earns 6% interest compounded quarterly. Round your answers to the nearest SIP. Okay, so it's a TVM solver. We're compounding quarterly. And actually, if you hit the reset on this, it clears everything out. Goes back to the settings. So is this amount, this 4,000, what kind of a value is that? Where do I put that? Future value, in order to have. That's what we want to have in the future. Was it 4,000? And I'm going to put it as positive because that's what I want to come back to me, right? Makes sense? 5 years from now. But I'm doing it quarterly. So 5 years is how many periods? 5 times 4 gives us 20. The interest rate they said was 6%. There are no payments. You could either put 0 there or just leave it blank and then click on present value. How much do we need to put in as a lump sum? And again, it's negative because we have to pay this to somebody and then we'll get our 4,000. $2,969.88. I like to just copy and paste it over here. Check our answer and we're good. So again, it's if you're getting these wrong, it's with this method, it's because you're putting the numbers in the wrong place. So just take a look and say, oh, I put it in payment. It should have been up, so that's typically what will happen. Okay. But otherwise you're going to get this, you're going to get the correct answers. And again, this is a way when you're working with your financial advisor or you're getting a car loan or anything, you'll be able to check all their values. And sometimes with car loans, especially, it's like the monthly payments. Where's this extra $50 a month coming from? Oh yeah, we threw in some insurance and this and that, some extras. I didn't want the extras. Okay, but you'll be able to catch them because a lot of times they don't want to tell you those things. So the last one is a bank features a savings account that has an annual percentage rate of 5% with interest compounded monthly. So we have the compound interest one. Ashlyn deposits $3,000 into the account. So we'll clear this out. Does it sound right? 3,000 should be the present value because she's depositing it at one time. It's not a payment. 5% interest compounded monthly. So then we fill these in, 5% monthly. And how long is she going to leave it there? Oh, how much money will Ashlyn have in the account in 1 year? Okay, so that's 1 year monthly, 1 times 12, 12. So that's the number of periods. No payments, so we just calculate on the future value. She'll have 3,153. Now again, you could have put the negative up above, but sometimes we just get, we just understand it's a different direction. It's not real critical. I'm going to copy that number without the negative and plug it in here, 3,153.49. Okay. Now, this is a little tricky thing. What is the annual percentage yield for the savings account? Because she's getting the money paid, the interest paid to her monthly, it's actually going to be more than 5%, a little bit more. One way to calculate this is, since we got our money, everything's here, what we're going to change is if this was paid annually, then it would be once a year. And then what would the rate need to be to give me the same return? And notice I'm going to click on rate. It's going to be a little bit more than 5%. But this is in the homework as well, so you may want to this is one way to calculate it without having to go to the formula. I'll show you that the formula will give you the same thing, but I click on rate, 5.1. So it's like getting an extra 0.1%. Round to the nearest hundredth of a percent, that will be 5.12, right? Round the second one gets rounded up because of the 6, 5.12. So that's the effect. They were actually only paying 5%, but the yield of the money was performing as if they were paying 5.12% because of getting interest on the interest. Okay, but that's a little tricky way to get the APY. And there's, I think, 4 or 5 questions on the APY. You can actually use this calculator. You calculate it for 1 year first at the compounding rate, and then you change it to annual, and then you calculate on the rate with these values in there. And then you don't even have to use that other formula. How's that feel so far? Okay. And then the homework is, we still got about an hour almost, is just going to be going through similar type problems using either the simple interest calculator or the compound interest calculator. Again, when it says simple interest, that's when you use simple interest. If it doesn't say simple interest, you will use the TVM calculator. And you fill in all the blanks. There'll be one missing spot. Solve on that. That's what we're going to put in there. And remember to kind of get a feel for, is this good or is this bad? Is it what I thought it would be? To get sort of just this number sense about investments. What's a good interest rate? What's a good amount of time to keep things deposited? So then you can start doing your own planning. I want to retire in 5 years. I want to plan in 20 years. But I need to have this much money. So it tells you, I'd like to retire next year, sure, but it ain't going to happen. I won't have enough money to live off of. And I love what I do. That's the other thing, is the best investment is what you're doing right now, is you're investing in yourself, getting yourself into doing something you love to do. Because if you love doing it, it's not work anymore. You'll keep doing it. And it's okay. You go and do it, and you got this, and again, I've never complained about having too much money. I've complained when it's tight. There's not enough money to buy all the stuff this month, which happens often. But I'd like to get that place where, and there's times in my life where it's been that way. It's been, you've been cashy or something. So you can make that happen for yourself. Watch what you're doing, manage your money, and then understand how things are working. And even, economies go down, bad things happen, hurricanes come and destroy everything. You got to start over sometimes. But then you just say, okay, it's not what I planned, but I can do this again. It's just use these natural laws of money. It's how it works. So that's what the homework there is for you, to kind of figure out how this all works, explore through it. Again, get it to 70%. You're all good. We'll do it again on Monday. We'll talk about loans. And again, we'll focus on just sort of the characteristics of loans, but the calculations are going to be pretty much the same because we use these same things. It's just we're calculating on different things. Okay, the money's going in a different direction. We're on the other side of the table. Any questions? The simple interest calculator. So this is the TVM is for everything except simple interest. This one that says, it will say at the top, simple interest calculator. So it will have to say simple interest. And that's a good question, because actually most things in our world are not simple interest. They used to be before computers, but now with computers, just about everything is compound interest, because it's going to be. A few things are still kind of like some life insurance. If you invest and they don't, there's a few things where you could use a simple interest, but uh, you'll see in the comparisons, compound interest is so much better. People don't, nobody's lining up to get into a simple interest investment, except for very short periods of time. All right. So I'm going to stop this stuff here.